Welcome back to the Live to Grind podcast show. I'm Brennan T. Adams, and I'm sitting here with John Shin. How you doing?
Woohoo! What's up?
In your own place.
Hey!
Here, look at this. So we got John Shin, the executive producer of Think and Get Rich, the movie. We've known each other for a year and a half now.
Yeah?
Yeah?
God, time flies, huh?
Time flies. I got to spend the day with you. Been hanging out at your house and just learning more about you, and I'm excited to jump in.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always fascinated, people that achieve success, where did their beginning? Like, where did they start? Where did they grow up? Let's talk about, where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
Wow. Let's take us back to 1960-something, right? But I grew up right here in Los Angeles, here. And we have a very famous hamburger joint down here in Los Angeles called the Original Tommy's Burger. And it's we grew up just a few blocks away. It's not in the greatest neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's, they call it the Rampart District, which is, according to the Los Angeles Police Department, they say that it's the highest crime ratio is right there in Rampart.
Really?
And that's been years, but hopefully it's improved and the neighborhood's gotten better. But we grew up there for a few years, and then we went to Eagle Rock, California, and then I pretty much grew up in Glendale, good old Glendale, California, right here, about 30 minutes from Calabasas.
What was it like growing up? What were your parents like? Your mom, your dad? What kind of family? Were they entrepreneurs?
I think they developed, my parents figured out very quickly to become entrepreneurs. My mother was a nurse for all these years, and then my dad was an x-ray technician. Both of them worked, a couple jobs. They used to carry the pagers, because they're always on call. And they realized very quickly that maybe they should start a business, and that was a better way to make money. And so, I grew up watching them start different businesses. So they've had the traditional stereotype of Asians owning delis and liquor stores and dry cleaners. Well, that was them. They had it all, because they just didn't know what other, creative business to be in, and that's what they did. And they did the manual labor. So I watched all that stuff.
So did you actually work in the business?
I did.
Tell me some of the businesses, what you learned and just what it was like.
Well, I think one of my first places I worked at was my parents' liquor store. And seeing these people come in every day and drinking, buying alcohol. And I remember people would come in and buy bottles of something called Thunderbird and Night Train, and it was like the cheap man's.
Never heard of it. Yeah.
Oh, right. It's
like Fireball today's day and age.
Yeah, exactly. Like Boone's Farm, and they would ask for a brown bag, and I was like wondering why why they want a brown bag. Well, I can't, because I was told that you can't drink alcohol in the streets and stuff, I never wanted my mother or my father to be there, because I started seeing bad people coming through, daily, just drinking their lives away. And they were around a lot of drunks and people like that. And so, I was always looking for a better way for my parents to make money, and even for myself to make money. I didn't want to do what they were doing. And it was one night, I'll never forget it, where my mother, it was a Saturday night, and they were closing the liquor store down. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I got the call that the police officers were there, and my uncle driving me, because he was at my house with us at that time of day, at that time of night, and he said, we have to go to the liquor store. Something happened. There was a shootout. And I kept on saying, is my mom okay? Is my dad okay? And he said, no one knows the details. The police is all there. There's been a shootout. And I remember going there, and when I finally got there and hearing this horror story, how these three guys came in, and one guy distracted one of my employees. The other one went down the other way. They were getting booze, and then one guy actually distracted my dad at the cashier, and before he knew it, he pulled out a gun, and there was an all-out shootout. My dad pulled out a pistol. He shot the guy that was over at the counter, and then we had two other employees in the cooler, because they were stocking in all the beverages, so they're ready for the next day. Well, inside there, they had shotguns inside the freezer, so they came out and they were literally unloading their shotguns, and it was an all-out thing. And I remember my mom; she was bleeding right here at the tip of her nose, because the bullet that one of the guys had shot had grazed my mom's nose right here, and it cut it with the heat and the speed of it, cut her nose right here a little bit, and that's where she was bleeding from. So I said, I don't think I ever want to be in the liquor store business, and so a few months later we ended up selling that, and then they got into the dry cleaning business, and so I had to be there, and I'm in the back, man, literally like pressing, dry cleaning stuff, and just.
You did a lot of manual labor growing up.
Yeah, a lot of labor, manual labor, dirty,
I mean, your parents were all fine after the shooting, correct?
Yeah, they're great, but they said, I kept on saying, I cried and pleaded with them because now they wanted to sell that and then go to another liquor store and buy another liquor store, right? As if they didn't learn their lesson from there. But yeah, they eventually said enough is enough too. So
what was that emotional experience like looking back on that? How has that kind of ingrained how you do business today? Learning from that experience?
Well, I learned about work ethics, because I think too many people right now, they want to become financially independent, right? But they're trying to become a business owner or an entrepreneur with an employee mindset, which means working 9 to 5, right?
Yeah.
And so they're already at 4:30, they're already clocking down, the minutes so they can leave at 5 o'clock. And in some workplaces, people are backing their cars into their parking spaces so they can jet out of there even faster, because they want to get out of that job, and so I never understood 9 to 5 because I never really had a 9 to 5, right? So for me, working till 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning on my business was a normal pattern, right, for me. So I realized that pretty early on,
You're a born Spartan entrepreneur, as
what I mean? So when people say, oh, it's 5 o'clock, it's time to go home, I go home and do what? Like I didn't even know what that meant, like to go home, you know what I mean? And so yeah, for me, it was just flat out work really hard and not let anybody else outwork you, So when my friends were out partying, I was actually running a liquor store.
Yeah.
While my friends were going to a party or some club or whatever it was, I was actually pressing someone's shirt for them to pick up the next day.
So how old were you at that age pressing the shirt? Were you in your teens?
Yeah, I mean, I started when I was 8 years old. So I knew automatically my mom taught me how to count money, So when someone comes in and they buy something for $6.70, right, that how do I give change back? You know what I mean?
So what was the first entrepreneur endeavor that you went on by yourself?
Ooh, good question. So I actually went and so after all that kind of stuff, I told my parents, after they sold their dry cleaning and whatever, and now they're trying to figure out what else to get into. I actually got a job as a valet parker, right? So valet parking at a restaurant was a cool thing because you get a lot of tips, right?
Tips, yeah.
And so a bunch of the guys, we all got together. It was like our Friday, Saturday night thing. We would basically park cars and we would get tips. And so at the end of the night, one of the guys came around and he actually picked up just a ton of money from all the money we collected that night in parking fees and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, who does that guy work for, And pulled up in a really nice car, kind of like a gangster, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he pulled up and he pulled up and he rolled down his window and the guy who was running the event handed him a little envelope with cash in there and he drove away and that was it. I was like, wow, I said, I think I can do this. So basically what I did is I started going around, I made these little business cards and it was called VIP parking. That was what it was called, VIP parking. Yeah, VIP parking, VIP Valet Parking Inc., right? And I wasn't even really an Inc., I just called it Inc. because it looked cool.
It seemed cool.
Yeah, it just seemed cool. I didn't even know what Inc. meant, right? And so I made these little business cards at a local print shop and then I went to a little sign store and I asked them to make me a little sign that says valet parking only, $3, and 50 cents. And so anytime somebody gave me $3.50, we would just go, oh, we don't have any change. And I'd say, oh, they just keep it. You know what I mean? So every car got $5. Does that make sense, right? And if we had, 300 cars at $5, I was making $1,500 a night.
Making some good cash, yeah.
Yeah, $1,500 and minimum wage was like $4.
And how old were you?
I was like 17, 18 years old.
Learning young.
Yeah. And so, but I never told the people that we went and got the valet parking contracts that I was the owner, but I was the owner and I was just representing the company, you know what I mean? And then I asked a friend of my, one of my friends, I asked his dad if he would come and just act like he was the owner. Right, and said, hey, I wanted to introduce you to the owner. And he's like, hey, nice meeting you. Yeah. Hope John's been taking good care of you. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And that was it. And he says, if anything ever goes wrong, you give me a call, right? And the guy said, hey, no problem. So far John's been doing great. And so the father was just a figure. He wasn't even a real title person in my company. And so, yeah, it was pretty crazy. And eventually we were doing, we would start hitting these nightclubs. And our nightclubs
that's
were
where the
paying
money is.
$25 for valet parking, right? And if you had the front rows, you paid a little bit more.
Paid more.
And so every Friday and Saturday and Sunday, I mean, even on Thursday nights, or I think it was Wednesday nights, it was salsa nights or something like that. And so almost every night I was bringing home, personally, at the age of like 18, I was bringing home like $1,500 a month.
What was the one thing? So you probably had a lot of, I don't know, Lamborghinis and fancy cars come up. What was the one thing you learned from just the presence and the aura of those people of influence that came into that club? What did you take away from just analyzing them?
I was wondering, like, what do all these people do? Like, what do they do for a living? Why do they come here and they drink themselves? You know what I mean? Why do they buy all this alcohol?
Spending money,
Yeah, blow money. While I was trying to make money, they're throwing money away. And so I said, I'm never going to do what these guys do. You know what I mean? So I've never really ever gone in my entire life to a club and spent money for drinks before.
Wow.
Because I just saw these people coming out and just fumbling and, just being silly. Women just
doing dumb things.
Yeah,
and
dumb
spending all
things.
their money in
Yeah,
the
guys doing stupid things. Women. It wasn't even a sex thing. It was just people were just so consumed with alcohol that I saw that destroy people's lives. At the age of like 18, so I had no desire to do that. So I was like, I'm gonna make money, and I literally would come home and I'd count my money, and I'd go, man, I just made this much money. And when you're like 18 years old, 19 years old, and you're making 30 grand a month,
it's pretty good money.
Yeah, exactly. At the time where I was at, does that make sense? And I didn't want people to know I was making that kind of money, so I never went and bought fancy cars or did anything. I held all the cash.
So how did you exit the company? How long were you in that? What did you do?
Yeah, how we exited the company was there was one restaurant, and this restaurant used to be a former bowling alley. So you can only imagine how big this place was. It was a big banquet center. And there were all these really nice cars in the front, right? Porsches and you name it, Mercedes and Ferraris and all that kind of stuff. And that night I had almost 40 guys parking cars. So you can only imagine how many cars were coming through this place when you have 40 valet parkers.
Built
right?
up, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just enormous. Just at that one location, 40 guys parking cars, right? And I had stopped by, I'm in my suit and I'm sitting there just saying, spending a little time with the boys and a little bonding session. And I see these 4 people walk up, and you could tell they weren't very good guys. And the first guy comes out and he pulls out a gun and he says, give me the keys to this car, right? And another guy pulls out a shotgun, and all I saw was his finger on the trigger. And it just scared the daylights out of me that if this guy gets a little crazy, gets a little finger trigger, or barely even touches the trigger, that shotgun could go off and shoot one of my guys.
Somebody, yeah.
So I said, hey guys, we want no trouble. I said, just put the guns down. We'll give you all the keys. Whatever keys you want, you can have it. And basically, we want this car, this car, this car, and this car. They took the keys, they got in the car, they started driving away.
They stole them.
They stole them, yeah. And we had a guy, I'll never forget, his name was Walter, who had just applied to the sheriff's department, and we had another lot somewhere else, and basically he was at this other lot, and we would park cars over there, and he was driving a van shuttling us back and forth, but we all had walkie-talkies and comms. And he heard us say that we're getting ripped off, they're ripping off 4 cars right now, go, 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 everybody catch this guy. And Walter went chasing them in our rental van that we had from Budget Rent-A-Car. And next thing you hear, just a few minutes later, you hear all this sound. And we knew that these cars had all got into an accident. And so, yeah, that was it. So we had to pay for 4 destroyed cars.
You didn't have any insurance?
We did have insurance. We had something called Garage Keepers Liability Insurance. Yeah. And it paid out, but the insurance company basically terminated our contract. And we couldn't get insurance anymore after that. No one wanted to insure us because we had 4 cars.
So you were out of business then? We
were out of pretty much business, yeah. We had 4 cars and a rental. We had 5 cars completely totaled.
You were 17?
I was 19 years old now. Yeah.
19. So who were your mentors at that time? Because you had to have somebody at least guiding you. I mean, you were 19 years old, you're making good money.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Who were some of your mentors?
Oh, man. Who are some of my mentors? I've got a lot of mentors. At
least at 19. At 19 years old, when you were just getting into entrepreneurship, who taught you the things you knew?
I think the mentoring actually even began when I was 5 years old, you
Yeah.
know. My first mentor are my parents. You know, they've been incredible mentors to me. My dad and my mom, and both of them had their own way of mentoring. So mom was more the good person kind of mentor, doing the right things all the time, you know, and it's not about money kind of thing, and always treating people right, you know. And then my dad was a different kind of mentor. He was more of a philosophical mentor, right? In terms of, he never gave me the answer, but he would also give me some sort of a story or a lesson.
Give me an example.
Well, one time he said, you know, I was telling, he just said, I was really down, right? And he said, sometimes, you know, you have to learn to, the outcome was what it is, but he asked me one time, he said, put my hands together like this. And you know, I put my hand out like this, and he goes, let's imagine for a moment that inside that hand, you have rotten rice, like bad rice. And I said, okay, great, and I'm holding on to all that rice. And I said, okay. And then he says, but if you eat that bad rice, what is it going to do to you? It's going to kill you, right? It's going to poison you. It's going to make your tummy hurt and all that kind of stuff. But if you have to eat, though, right? You have to have more rice, and you can't eat because you got all that in there. So if I took regular new rice and I poured it into your hand, what would happen to all the other rice? And I said, basically, it would overflow. And he goes, yeah, but the main rice, the bad rice is still in your hand. All the good rice is what? Overflowing, and you cannot hold on to the new rice. I said, okay, that's true. So he says, well, what do you think you need to do? And I said, well, I need to get rid of my old rice. And he goes, exactly. When you get rid of your old rice, then you get new rice, right? And it's the same thing in life. If you hold on to all your negative things in life, right, and all that baggage and all the things that have happened to you, and you hold on to it, new things can't even come into your life because you can only have a capacity of holding so much. But until you let those things go, new things cannot come into your life.
Yes. I like that.
So you have to learn to let things go and dispose of them.
That's a really good lesson. What are some other lessons that you learned that you apply today, that you think about in terms of just valuable lessons to life and making money and also just living a good life?
Well, one thing my dad always said is be frugal with your money and invest your money, and don't get too caught up in all the material things, because all the material things don't go up in value. You know, they always go down in value. They depreciate. So,
liability.
Exactly. So he says there's good debt and then there's bad debt. You know, bad debt are your credit card debts. Does that make sense,
Yeah.
right? But good debt is like real estate. You know, if you're buying real estate, that's good debt. So he taught me all about those kind of things. So he was more the money finance guy. And then my mom was the character type mentor. So they've been wonderful role models, right? And then my master, my martial art master, he was extremely tough on me in terms of me being one of his first students and trying to build up his own, you know, studio, then how I was supposed to be a role model to everybody else, right?
How many years did you do that?
20 years.
20 years.
20 years.
So why so long? Were you just passionate about it? Did you want to become somebody in that industry?
One thing he said to me was, he says that if you really want to know martial arts, you won't understand martial arts or learn martial arts until you become a black belt. And so what I learned from that is it took 7 years in our school to get a black belt.
Wow.
Okay, so there's not a whole lot of black belts.
A lot of commitment.
Yeah, exactly, right? So one thing I learned is to be patient. Sometimes when you want something really, really bad, you want instant gratification. And so a lot of the younger generation people today, they're used to getting things quickly, now, immediate. Exactly. They have the I want it now syndrome, right? Even the microwaves are taking too long, right? 2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
Phones, internet, everything, TV speed, internet speed, everything has got to be
instant gratification.
Instant. So when you go in business, you want that instant gratification, and it's not going to happen for you instantaneously, right? And so, you know, what I heard one time, someone said to another person who was speaking, he said, the question is, you know, how do you develop your purpose? Like, what is your purpose? And the response was, you don't find your purpose, purpose finds you.
Purpose finds you.
Right? And I thought that was kind of an interesting comment or response. And so the guy that's in the audience says, I have another question then. And the speaker says, what is it? And the person in the audience says, well, I was wondering, how can I get purpose to find me faster? Right? Because I want to learn it. I want my purpose to find me really fast. And so they said, that's a really good question. And he says, well, why do you want it fast? Because that's the world we live in. We want instant, right now. And the thing is, success doesn't happen overnight, and you have to be ready for the success. So everything, all the little stumbles and all the things and challenges and adversities that you have are preparing you for it. So it's like someone says, teach me calculus, but you haven't heard algebra yet.
Yeah.
Right? Or teach me algebra, but you haven't even had geometry, or you haven't had multiplication tables memorized yet.
Yeah. It's trying different things because a lot of people, like you said, they want it now.
Exactly.
But if they realize that they failed, failure is a learning process that actually prepares you for that. Because if you just got it right away, let's say you just were given $1 million without even working for it, you would lose that so quick.
Exactly.
So what was your first investment that you did growing up? Like, what was the first thing that you invested in?
So I want to answer that question, but I want to finish a thought on the martial art thing.
Yeah.
So there's a school down the street, and they opened up a school, and they wanted to take a lot of our students away from our school to their school. So they were selling classes, and they were giving away black belts. Like, you can become a black belt in 2 years, not 7 years. So we lost a lot of students, right? Because everybody wanted their black belt, but they wanted it in 2 years, right? Which is fine. I mean, if you want a black belt, go buy one for $5. So a lot of people went over there, and then we ended up having the local and the state championships, right? Tournaments. And we all went there. So we went there and they went there. When we got into a black belt tournament, the black belts, their black belts who had been trained for 2 years versus ours that had been trained for 7 years, we were in the same tournament, and every single one of their people ended up knocked out or going into an ambulance and being carried off on a stretcher.
5 years on, I mean.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't have the stamina, the experience, the muscle, the strength and everything else to prepare you for a black belt tournament. You haven't developed the speed. So I learned very quickly that it's not just about getting a black belt, it's about training and getting into the habit.
It's the process and
absolutely,
the routine to
absolutely,
do it.
Yeah. So people say, I want to make $1 million today. Well, that's great. But then why do so many people win the lotto and they lose all of it, right? Because they haven't been trained. They don't even know how to, because they don't know how to retain that money.
It wouldn't even be as glorious to just get the black belt in 2 years. If you spend 7 years, you worked and earned that, and
That's
you
right.
get it, and you're proud
That's
of it.
right. That's right.
What was your record? How many times did you go into fights? I don't know how that all works.
Ooh, I mean, first of all, I was never knocked out, so I don't even know what it feels like to be knocked out, you know what I mean? But I have knocked out just about everybody, whether it was a kick to the body and knocking out their wind, or a kick to their face, or, and it knocked them out, and, they called it quits. But I couldn't even tell you how many fights I've had. I mean, in tournaments, because we were competing almost every weekend. We were going to some tournament somewhere. And then we went to the state, we went to the nationals, we went to the World Games, Pan American Games.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was like our life. I mean, that's all we did.
Do you still do any kind of practice?
Yeah, I mean, I still practice. I don't compete anymore. I mean, I don't, have the same regiment that we used to have, obviously. But I can still do the splits. I mean, I can still kick over my head. I can still do a spinning hook kick, and, I just don't have the speed like I used to.
I want you on my side if somebody's going to jump us.
You know what I mean? I mean, there's so many things that people do in martial arts that I may not be able to kick with speed over my head or something like that, but I still have all the techniques if we were to go down to the ground. I got all my pinning and all my grappling.
You work towards your strengths.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Learn how to use them.
Yeah, and the thing in martial arts too is that it doesn't matter how big the other person is. The bigger they are and the more stiffer they are, the easier it is to take those guys down.
Yeah.
So
it's always interesting to watch these fights. You have a really big guy and this tiny guy, but that person just knows their moves in one hit.
Right.
Just takes one hit.
Yeah.
But how long did it take them to train for that one hit to knock them out? No different than how long did it take somebody to make that one deal that made them $1 million? Exactly.
Yeah.
So what was the first investment? First real investment that you put money down? I
think my first real investment was actually was on a piece of property, and I bought a single family home because everybody said buy real estate, And I bought the house. I bought it for $200,000. It was about a $200,000 property. And we ended up selling it for, I think it was like $450,000. So we made, a couple $100,000 on that deal. And the challenge I had was not, fortunately we made money on the back end. The challenge was finding a tenant to stay occupied in my property and pay me rent on time every single month, right? So that was the biggest challenge. So if you don't have a tenant, you're basically having to shell money out of your own pocket. So when everybody says, oh, real estate's such a great business, opportunity, yeah, they're only giving you the positives of it, but they're not telling you the other side where if you lose a tenant and you're trying to find another good tenant to come in who's not going to trash your house, what do you got to do to find that good tenant? So we left the residential space and we got into commercial.
Okay.
And we liked commercial a lot better, and we also liked multi-unit. So when you're getting 50, 100, 200, 300 unit complexes, it's a lot better because if you have one or two tenants who don't pay, you still have 298
as long as you have
others.
enough to cover your
exactly.
loan and plus some.
That's right.
So what was real estate, was that your first big moment of making hard cash of six figures? Like, hey, was real estate your first big win?
Real estate was, I think real estate was probably the biggest, first lump sum of money that we got. And
what was your mindset process? Like, what were you thinking in the moment? Because you look at what you had made prior to then, and then you had this big win. What was going through your mind?
I said, if I could just do this 5 more times, right, then I'd have $1 million. If I did it 20 more times, I had X dollars. And so I always had this desire to hit, at that time, it was basically I need to get to $10 million, right? Because if I go to $10 million, okay, and if I make 10% return on my money, I'd make $1 million.
At
right?
what age were you a millionaire?
Ooh. I think by
first time hit it, because you probably went back, if you went back and forth, but what was the first time that you realized, okay, I'm officially a millionaire?
Now, when you say millionaire, that means cash millionaire or equity in your house and everything else, or total net worth?
Net worth.
Oh, I think I was there probably at what, 22, 21, 22?
At what time was it cash?
I think, cash millionaire?
Yeah.
I was probably a cash millionaire by the time I was, gosh, that's a good question. Let's say probably 22, 23 years old.
So thinking about that now, because I know so many people that are either watching, listening, they're like, okay, I want to become a millionaire. What can I learn from that? What is your advice for somebody that is looking to obviously achieve a millionaire status and even beyond? What's your top 3 tips or tangible steps to apply to be able to get there?
To make $1 million?
Yes.
Well, first thing I've always said is make sure that whatever you sell, right? If it's a product that you're selling, make sure that the product you sell is a necessity versus a luxury, right? Because if it's a necessity, everybody has to buy it. Like auto insurance is a necessity. You can't say, let me think about buying auto insurance, because everybody has to have it by law, right? Now, health insurance is a requirement. So why would you not want to sell something that everybody must have, because it is a necessity? That's one of the reasons why if you look at Apple and you look at phones and you look at, Microsoft, they provided a product that everybody pretty much needed. It was almost like you couldn't function anymore. Yeah. It was a necessity. But if you're going to sell nice cars, that's not a necessity, right? That's more of a luxury item, right? I had a friend who came to me and sold me some knives. It wasn't my friend, it was my wife's friend. And they did a little demonstration of the knives, and I'm like, oh my God, I'd be afraid to use those knives on my finger in case I cut it off. Yeah. And they said, John, it's quite the contrary. The reason why most people chop off their fingers or injure themselves is because their knives are so dull that as you're cutting, you're pushing so hard that you slip and you miss and you cut yourself. But if you just let the knife do all the work without you having to press your finger down,
you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. And I said, oh wow. I said, how much are these knives? And he said, $6,000. I was like, $6,000? I said, dang. I said, that's not a necessity. That's a luxury. But my wife really wanted those knives at that point, and so we ended up buying a couple sets. A full-blown, knives, exactly. For our kitchen. But those are all.
So number 1 is necessity.
A necessity is absolutely critical, right? Number 2 is make sure that you sell a product that you're going to get residual income. right? So whatever you sell today, you'll still continue to get paid on the back end without having to.
Not one time.
Exactly. So, my wife started investigating and researching and studying all the different industries that had residual income. And what she discovered was, number one, is you make residual income in the entertainment industry, right? So film, commercial, TV, every time it airs, you're getting paid again, right? Now that's true residual income. Movies, is residual income.
Yeah.
Music is residual income. Financial services is residual income. Credit card, merchant processing industry has residual income. So we wanted to get our hands in whatever has residual income on the back end.
Okay, so that's number 2.
Yeah.
What's number 3?
Number 3 is a product that's going to be, that you can do mass production, right? Instead of selling one Rolls Royce, that you can sell a lot of something. Yeah, exactly. So that a whole, because if you have a big old audience, how many people can buy a Rolls Royce and how many people can buy a Toyota?
How do you figure it out? Because a lot of people are wondering, what do I sell? Like, how do you discover your product to sell?
I never really discussed. I never really created the products. Basically, you find the people who are creative that bring the ideas to you.
And you sell it.
And you sell it, yeah. Like I had one girl who came to me and she says, John, I've got this great wig. I was wearing this wig at this EDM event and everybody asked me about it. I was like, wow, what's so special about the wig? And she says, wait till you see it. And the moment I saw it, I was like, wow, that's a really cool, I thought it was your hair. I thought, it's so cool. And she says, I think we can sell this thing. And I said, really? And she says, yeah. And I said, well, let's find out if we can find somebody in China to make it for us. And they said, yes. So they created this, we sent the wig to China. They actually came back to us and told us that the wigs would cost us basically $50.
Yep.
She sold them for $5.50 on Instagram. And on the first day, she sold 1,000 of those on Instagram. Multiply that by $500 a piece profit. Okay. So you just do the math.
It's a lot of money.
Exactly, right? And so people come up with ideas and you just have to be open. And most people just aren't open, right? And that's why they're poor, because they have this mind is completely sealed from any kind of an idea or a business or a way to make money. They're not open-minded. And so I always like to hear every business idea, because it's like, well, what if? You know what I mean? At least you don't know. What if someone told you that you could buy it into Facebook, right? What if you could have bought into Google? What if you could have bought into Alibaba or Amazon for that matter, right?
Let's talk about, I'm really just fast, I want to go deep into the investment side. So what is one investment that you made that you would have never thought, or a product that you helped sell that you would have never thought that it was going to be one of your biggest wins, but it was? Like the hair, I just thought of like, what?
Yeah, I mean, there's a product called an IUL, which is called an Indexed Universal Life Policy.
Okay.
Right? And, they call this, Anthony Robbins in one of his books calls it the rich man's IRA, right? Yeah. Because the idea is you could put a ton of money into this IUL, right? Into this, there's basically a life insurance component to it, and then there's a savings portion compared to it. That savings portion has a guaranteed floor. So no matter what the market does, you always get 1%. And that's like the minimum return on your money, let's say, hypothetically. Wow. Yeah. And then on the upside potential, you can go up as high as 15%. So you'll never lose your principal, but you're going to earn somewhere between 1 and 15%. That's not a bad opportunity, you know what I mean? Yeah, with no risk. I mean, there's absolutely no risk. So all these people who get clobbered is because they get greedy. They want all the upside potential, but at the same time, on the downside, they're also going to take the hit. And so you got to pay.
So they don't diversify. They don't.
And I hear a lot of different people on social media. There's books and put all your money in real estate. Okay, and so that's crazy. That's putting all your eggs in one basket, as you just alluded to, right? So diversify your portfolio.
Do you do anything with cryptocurrency?
Yes. So I had somebody, I didn't know anything about cryptocurrency, didn't really know how it worked.
It's a big millennial thing.
Yeah, it's a big thing. And so, so actually the only way to find out about crypto is you have to invest in it, and find out for yourself. How does it work, And I didn't really understand what crypto was. I didn't know if it was a tangible product, if it's a piece of paper, is it, what is it? You know what I mean? And then I invested into it, and basically I invested into computers that mine. You know, they mine the cryptocurrency,
Yeah.
right? And so when you buy these machines, they're super loud, right? So you can't just create a machine and stick it in your family room, in your living room, because the sound is just so enormous and it takes a lot of power, right? And so what you want to do is you got to go into another location where there is lower costs of energy, right? And so there's certain states where that cost is very low. And that's why people like going to a place like Montana and they get a big old warehouse because
like Bitcoin mining.
Exactly,
Okay.
Bitcoin mining. So you keep that overhead down.
So where do you see the future of that?
You know,
Just
if I
from your
had
initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, if I had the crystal ball, I mean, I'd be a multi-gazillionaire. You know what I mean? If that's such a word. I don't know. I think the greedy part of me says I want to put all my money in crypto, right?
Yeah.
But realistically, you know, it just depends on whether you think the dollar is going to be anywhere, right? What is the future of the dollar going to be?
I mean, what is the future of the dollar? I mean, the dollar, what's it worth? About 72 cents of the actual dollar?
Yeah, dollar, exactly, right? So if you compare that to Europe, like last year we went to Europe and we were walking around Italy and Greece, and so we went to a store and we had a $100 Ben Franklin. So I said, hey, I got $100, and I asked them what my exchange was, and they were giving me back 70 euros for $100. So I lost 30% of my money just in the conversion. So yeah, I mean, I don't know where the future of the dollar is going to be, but I tell people, you know, don't put all your eggs into crypto.
I mean, looking into it, we're due for a recession. Don't want to like scare anyone, but if knowing that, what would be your advice to somebody going over the next 3 to 5 years to ride the storm?
So, you know, it's interesting when I look at certain investments, it seems like almost every 30 years, there's a period that every 30 years, it goes 2 negative years. And if I had the brochure, I can actually show it to you, but it's pretty amazing that there are certain corrections here and there, and it's like a 1-year cycle. But almost every 30 years, there is a 2-year cycle where the market goes down for 2 years. And it's very consistent. And I've got the whole graph from 1933 to 2016 to show you the actual numbers and the proof of it.
And we're due for it.
So, well, the last time we had was
2008?
2008. So we got a little more time before
10
we see
years.
2 negative years in a row. But
When the time comes, be ready.
Yep.
And be ready to get in on great opportunities. That's the thing, like for the downfall, there is opportunity for people to get in on great deals.
Yeah.
Stock.
So I have a friend who basically said, hey, John, do you like shrimp? And I said, I love shrimp,
I love
right?
shrimp too.
And I said, John, I want to bring some over. And he brought them over in these ice, chests, like crushed ice and stuff. And in it were these shrimps that were enormous. They didn't even look like shrimps. I mean, they looked like a lobster.
The jumbo ones, yeah.
Yeah, it was like tiger
like
shrimp on
Texas,
steroids, right? I mean, they were huge. See, these are the biggest shrimps I ever had. I said, how did you get so many? And what ended up happening was when the economy went down and then we had the natural disasters down in Texas and the Gulf, all those companies that were out there that were in the shrimp business basically sold all their boats for shrimp, you know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
So there was one guy out there who basically saved all his money, was able to weather the downside of the market, and when everybody was leaving, he basically went and bought all their businesses and all their boats, right? So he literally at that moment took that opportunity and built up one of the biggest shrimp distribution companies in the United States. And so
he saw an opportunity.
He saw an opportunity, yeah.
So if we're talking about that right now, and I'll state my thoughts, you can state yours, looking into the future of where money can be made. Let's say if everybody wants to become an entrepreneur, where do you think money where you can find the most opportunity to make money, to be the quickest to the $1 million? I mean, it's all going to take time. Where do you see the most opportunity in the future, where we're at now in entrepreneurship, in business?
Wow. I would still say that the financial industry is a way to make $1 million rather quickly.
Yep.
Because
why?
Well, it pays big money. I mean, it pays a lot of money. If you had $200,000 in an IRA or a 401k or a SEP IRA or whatever it is, and I took your money and I transferred into, let's say, an annuity, which has all these wonderful guaranteed features in it, on $200,000, you get paid anywhere between 6 and 7% on that. So at 6%, it's $14,000.
It's good money.
Right? And that's one time, you get that up front, and hey, that's pretty good money, you know?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you get a percentage of whatever your cut is of that.
Yeah.
But, excuse me,
So
yeah.
financial, okay, so you see that. What else do you see?
I think that right now, content of some kind of content to help people grow their businesses, right?
Like educational content, video content?
Yeah, video content, all that kind of stuff. But as long as you're providing not only just the content, but a system that people can duplicate, right? So what does system, S-Y-S-T-E-M, that word system stand for? It is an acronym that says, save yourself some time, energy, and money. That's what a system is, right? So if you create a system and you're going to save me what? Time, energy, and money, I'm willing to pay you for that, right? So what kind of systems are you creating for me and providing value for my business? Okay, so I see a lot of people on social media. Don't you want to be somebody? Don't you want, and they're rah-rahing everybody, and you can't hype yourself to success, right? No. You can't go and deposit hype and rhetoric and excitement into your bank account,
Yeah.
So you got to be able to embrace systems, and I'm not the guy who's going to create every system. I'd rather have somebody else create the system and sell it to me so I can use it to get my business to the next level. Right.
Have somebody do the legwork, you figure it out, and you learn from it. That's why I don't understand. Why wouldn't you invest it? I've always invested in mentors or found somebody that already achieved what I achieved. Because if you want to do it yourself, you're going to have so many costly mistakes.
Yeah.
Just hire the person to show you exactly how to do it. The blueprint.
Yeah, exactly. Just yesterday, and I don't want to give it away, but I saw this great movie called The Hunter Killer, right? And it's about the submarine that has to get over to enemy territories over into the Russian waters.
Yeah.
And in that Russian water, and this is spoiler alert, so right now you may want to mute or turn down the volume, but he basically shows, he finds another Russian person who knew where all those mines were, right? And to get that submarine and navigate them through the waters underwater, right? To avoid all the different mines. And so the idea of finding a mentor and a coach is the same idea and principle to save you from crashing into those minefields and those landmines and prevent yourself from that failure. You know what I mean?
It's so important. It's important the people you're surrounding yourself. You talked about before, if you have the bad rice, you have to get rid of it.
That's right.
And so many people keep this bad rice or bad people in their life.
That's right.
And they can't ever move forward. It leads me to Think and Go Rich.
Yep.
How old were you when you first read the book?
So that was 1996. I was probably no more than, 25 years old or so?
So you read the book, and what was your first takeaway? I mean, every time you read it, I feel like every time I read it, something different comes. But when you first read it, what was your main takeaway?
Yeah, reading Think and Grow Rich, it's not one of those things where you read it once and you go, oh, I got it. It's like watching the movie Matrix, right? Where you have to watch it a couple times just to go, what was that? It was good, it was great, but I didn't understand. And you have to watch it a couple. Or the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio with Inception, right? Yeah. Where it was like you were in a dream inside of a dream inside of a dream, and it was so. And once you finally understood, you're like, wow, it's like unbelievable. Or reading the Bible, you can't read just one verse and go, oh, I got it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Think and Grow Rich is like that. Every time, as you just alluded to, I read it again, I'm like, I never got that. And it's interesting because as I sit there and I read the book, I'll highlight, I'll underline, and I'll do little writings on the side. And I'll read those again, but then the next time I read it, there's another sentence or a paragraph that I didn't highlight, and I'm like, how come I didn't get that the last time? But yeah, I think that book is a must read for everybody. And for me, when I read it, I couldn't put it down, right? It was like I had to go to the next chapter. What's the next nugget? What's the next nugget? What's the next nugget? So
it's just nice talking because we both have had. I mean, the book has changed so many lives. You just told me it sold over 160 million copies worldwide.
Right.
For me, when I read it, I realized you saw what Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, these people did. They were no different than you and I. They just They want to be extraordinary people. They did extraordinary things. They followed through and they just kept going. The problem is everybody wants it now.
That's right.
They want instant gratification. You have social media that you're going down. It's like, I need the next thing. ADD. It's like, I want it now, but it takes time.
That's right.
It doesn't happen overnight. So what is it like to be the executive producer of the movie Think and Grow Rich?
Ooh, what's it? Oh man, what an incredible honor. It's just to be able to put that amazing book into a theatrical setting so that people can watch it now on TV. And everybody always thinks it's similar to The Secret. And I thought The Secret was a wonderful movie when it first came out. I don't want to knock The Secret. I thought it was phenomenal, but it's totally different. Totally different than The Secret. And I've had somebody who says they're a huge Secret fan, and they were actually at my house, and I said, listen, I would you like to see just a 3-minute clip of it? And so I took them into my movie theater, and we saw 3 minutes of it, and they were like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Where can I buy it right now? And people need to get that movie, watch it.
It's a game changer.
It is, and I am super, super honored that, and it was a privilege for me to be the executive producer and to be around people like yourself, our director Scott Servine, who did a phenomenal job, with the time and the resources that he had. I mean, it was just phenomenal.
It's amazing. It's cool to see that bringing it together, all the amazing people of our time.
Sure.
And what it does allows people, because not everybody can relate to the Henry Ford or people way back when.
Right.
We're talking people now like yourself that are doing it in their own way, applying the principles, and it's in a movie.
That's right.
I'm honored to be a small part of it and be in with you and just on this journey, and it's just the beginning.
That's right.
And that leads into your book.
That's right.
So talk about what's going on there.
So it was, it was interesting as the book or the movie came out in October of 2017, and we
Hard
did this.
To believe that was a year.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? My goodness, it was almost a year, right?
Till I proposed, and then you were just at my wedding, which was exactly a year later.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Wow, and what a beautiful wedding you guys had. It was awesome.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, as people came up to me and said, "What a great movie! Can we get you to come and speak?" And as I was going to different places to speak, I wanted to really deliver an awesome message. I didn't want to just to be, don't you want to be somebody, And so, although I do believe that everybody is wired for success, but programmed to fail, right?
Sadly.
And so, what content can I give? So I went back and I started reading, and then I went and checked out that there's other books, right? There's a Think and Grow Rich Black Choice by Dr. Dennis Kimbrough, and there's a Think and Grow Rich by Lionel Sosa. And then Sharon Lechter, who also co-authored all the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books with Robert Kiyosaki, did Think and Grow Rich for Women. And then she did this awesome piece with the foundation, which was called Outwitting the
Devil. I love that one.
Yeah, I mean, what a wonderful job in how she, brought that out, And I was thinking, well, where's the Asian choice? I see the women's choice for women. She also did Think and Grow Rich for Women. Where's the women? Well, I see the women, I see the Latino, I see the black. Where's the Asian choice, right? And so I started Googling Think and Grow Rich Asian, Think and Grow Rich Oriental, Think and Grow Rich Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and Thailand, Vietnam, nothing. So that's when I called up Don Green and I said, Don, is there a Think and Grow Rich Asian choice? And he said, John, he says, we don't.
Which I couldn't believe.
Right, which is mind-blowing. And so... And there's a lesson to be learned from there. When you always think that someone else would have already done it, and no one has, that's when you have to go out there
and do it
yourself, right? Because you always think that someone else did it or someone else did it. You see a beautiful girl or a beautiful woman or a real handsome guy, you're like, oh, he's already taken. Like I met this one lady, I was talking to her, I said, so are you married? Do you have a boyfriend? You have children? She says, no, I'm single, and I just need somebody to ask me out. And I said, what do you mean ask you out? I said, you're absolutely beautiful. And she says, I don't know what it is. I scare men away, but I don't get asked out very often. I said, well, why do you think that is? There's something. I said, is there something wrong with you? And she says, no. And she starts laughing, and she just says, I think most people think that I would already have a boyfriend or something. And so I said, wow. All right, well, guys, she's single now, but you just never know. So, I called them up, and my wife even said, I'm sure someone's already done it in China, maybe, They said, nope, we don't have it. Think and Grow Rich and Asian Choice would be a wonderful thing. And I said, well, I would be honored if I can become the author of that. And so since January of this year, we've been off interviewing people almost daily, weekly, traveling all over the place, taking every opportunity to get in there and pick these people's brains and put them in the book. And it's been incredible.
Can you say some of the people?
Steve Aoki is
Nice.
one of them. Steve was originally supposed to only be a 30-minute interview and ended up becoming about 3.5 hours.
Nice.
So that was awesome. And we'll have
What was
that
one
up on-
takeaway you can share from him that you learned?
Well, gosh, I want to save that for the book, right? But I'll tell you what, I asked him, where did you get the idea of the cake throwing thing? Because he's famous for throwing his cake out into the audience and plastering everybody. Where did that come from? How did he get started? Because he is the son of Benny Hanna, and his
Who's
father.
Benny Hanna?
Benny Hanna owns, right, all the big restaurant chains, the Benny Hanna Japanese restaurants.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so his dad was famous. It's one of the most famous Japanese restaurants around the country. And so he didn't receive any of that and had to start from scratch. His dad said, you're not gonna inherit any of this stuff. You got to do your own thing.
That's good though, because if he would have, it would have, like we talked about before. If
Yeah.
you don't earn it, you don't feel as accomplished when you
Yeah.
have it happen.
You don't appreciate as much.
don't
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, he was extraordinary, and I appreciated him and his busy schedule. He travels about 220 days out of the year. He's in another country, and there's times where he's actually gone to 2 different countries on the same day, like literally to do his tours and all that kind of stuff. You know.
That's crazy.
So yeah, he's a remarkable. There was a girl named Jessica Cox. I don't know if you know Jessica Cox.
I think I do.
Jessica was a Filipino girl born with no arms, and they don't know why she was born with no arms. There's no genetic, there's nothing there that would indicate why she was born with no arms. It's just the way the Heavenly Father created her. And most people with no arms would start playing the victim card and all that kind of stuff. And guess what? This girl went on, she's in the Guinness Book of World Record to be the first person in the world to get a pilot's license. Okay.
Wow.
And she's a 4-time national Taekwondo champion, which is pretty amazing with no arms. Yeah. So she can pretty much kick anybody's butt with no arms right now.
It really shows that you can do anything if you put your mind to it.
Absolutely. You know?
And using your so-called disadvantage or fallback as your way to catapult forward.
Exactly.
Like so many people, they play the victim. But if you can learn to not play the victim, here's my situation, how do I use it to propel forward?
That's right. Yeah.
So before we go, what would be everything you've learned, what you've achieved, what's your best advice to give anyone to have success in life and fulfillment in all areas, whether it's money, wealth, love, whatever it may be?
Ooh.
What is your advice?
I would say your one advice is to get into groups, some sort of a collaborative group, right? You know, if people say, well, you got to dream big. Well, what does dream big really mean? You got to think big. Well, what does that really mean? What do you think about? What do you dream about? Sometimes I tell people, you have to think about what you're thinking about.
Yep.
Right? Because that's such an important thing. When I talk about dreams, you know, most people, I would have never known that, you know, that when you go to first class seating in airplanes, that they have different kinds of food than we do. Mm-hmm. You know, when I was sitting in coach in the very back, you know, sitting next to the bathroom in an airplane, right, in the 2 center seats and fighting for what? Elbow space on a chair rail inside the plane. I didn't know that the first class gets all this other goodies up front, you know, and so once you experience that, you don't ever want to go back to coach seating anymore, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't know what it felt like to have a suite in a hotel room, but once you've experienced a suite, you never want to go anything. You don't want to go back to anything less than that, right? There was a restaurant called the Sizzler, and I like Sizzler. It's got, you know what I mean, but you know, but once I eat, you know, Ruth Chris Steakhouse, I don't want to go and eat anything else. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like, once you're driving a Rolls Royce, how do you go anything below a Rolls Royce? And I would have never known even what it felt like until I got into someone else's Rolls Royce. So it's so important, they say, do be careful who you do associate with on a daily basis, you know? I heard this saying where, you know, you are the average of the 5 people. I don't know if there's a whole lot of validity. Does that make sense? I mean, so if I hang out with my kids, you know, they're, you know, 9 and 11 and 15 years old, excuse me, and those are the people I'm hanging out with. Or am I the average of my 5 kids? I mean,
It's who people you listen to and you collaborate with on projects and
absolutely.
and take advice from, too.
Absolutely.
That's huge.
Yeah. So I would say get into some sort of an organization, go and collaborate with people, get into a mastermind. And if you don't even know what you're going to do, other people will throw ideas at you.
Or what I love that you do is, and I always do this, if people are hungry, looking for ways to learn, like you give them a job. Or if I would go back in time, the first thing I would have did is I would have found somebody that already achieved, I'm talking to my teenage years, what I want to achieve. And I would have said, hey, I will work for you. You don't have to pay me. Just let me learn.
That's right.
And that would have made me just go so much further forward quicker.
That's right.
Because you learn so much and people are like, oh, I'm not getting paid.
Yeah.
That knowledge is worth so much.
Yeah.
Especially when they find out what you charge. It's like, oh, I get to learn from you?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's people who come here and they work out of my house, you know what I mean? And you know, they're working and all of a sudden they're like saying, this is how I want to live now. You know, I can't imagine living in a home smaller than this, you know? And it's kind of crazy. You know, once you experience something, you just don't want to go backwards anymore. You know?
Well, I've had a great experience here. It's been amazing getting to know more about what you're doing. When does your book come out? Where can I find the book? When
so
can I read
think, yeah, you'll see it on Amazon and all the different sites. There is a website that we have that you can pre-order at TGR, right? AsianChoice.com. Books are $25.
Yep.
And you'll see it everywhere. Coming out next month in the month of November 2018. So.
Well, congrats, man.
Thank you, man.
Thank you
Appreciate
so much.
You, Brandon.
For all you listening and watching, you can find out the notes how to get his book, but also the movie. Go to Amazon Prime. You can watch it now. Check out the movie and let us know what you think. Until next time, y'all, you know what time it is. It is time to go out there, create something great, become unforgettable. Because life is too short not to. I'm Brandon T. Adams. Have a great day, everyone.